that's loving, caring, and kind. And so we wrap all of that into this, and we recognize that capitalism is
You're on mute.
and secularized this day, as you stated. But we know that the essence of this day is about love. As love was given to us and born, we express that to other people in our lived experiences.
Amen. Give us the good news. I need that. Thank you for beginning that way. It helps to frame all that we're talking about.
Sure thing. Well, the good news today is that love still exists, and it can exist within the context of any relationship that you have. I know coming to the end of the year, things may have been difficult for you, especially in the relationship realm. This may be the year of divorce for you, a separation, breakup, all of that, but love can still exist. I'm reflective of back when, we used to actually flip through the newspaper and not a digitized version of it. I recall seeing a cartoon that caught my eye at an early age, and I did a little research. And I discovered that in the 1960s, Kim Casale, a New England cartoonist,
Dr. Knighton is on.
Strip that many of us have become familiar with. It originated as a series of love notes Kim created for her future husband. And that strip caught on and began appearing in newspapers around the globe in the 1970s. And for about 60 years or so, the work of Kim Casale has reminded humanity of what love is. You know, that little cartoon with that couple, the man and the female, and it says love is and has a quick quote. That's what I'm referring to. For those who have read the Bible, you're familiar with the Bible, you've gotten married within a Christian context, 1 Corinthians 13 does the same thing, as it paints a vivid picture of what love is, what love does, and what love looks like. And those sentences of this text are often shared, and I do it a lot, in wedding ceremonies as a pastor. And it's often agreed upon by both the bride and the groom. When turbulence strikes the relationship and crisis creeps in, love and its attributes and manifestations seemingly engage us in the destructive game of hide and go seek. But the good news is that reconciliation is possible. Will it require work? Yes. But here's the good news, it's still possible. And if reconciliation is what you desire, if you want your marriage or your relationship back on track, if you desire to right the wrongs that have taken place in your relationship, allow me to suggest a few practical ways in which you can begin to communicate love courteously and constructively. Number one, through patience. Your relationship didn't fall apart overnight, and guess what? You're not going to rebuild it in a day or two. As humans, we operate best when we're free. So I want you to resist the urge to set legalistic time frames on yourself or your significant other. If separation has occurred in the relationship, you want your partner to come back on their own volition, not because they felt forced to. And you want to express your desires and then step back and let them make the decision for themselves. Additionally, you've got to be patient with your partner's ambivalence and understand that emotions are pulling both of you in two different directions. And sometimes they're with it, sometimes they're not ready. And I don't want you to think that they're lying to you or they're even bipolar. They're just expressing their feelings in that particular moment. And I get it. To you, it seems like they're contradicting themselves. But you've got to express understanding and engage patience as they navigate feelings and emotions based upon what's occurred in the relationship. Not only must there be patience, but we can express our love through kindness. This word translated means to be useful or beneficial. Thus, kindness may be words or actions that are useful or beneficial to your partner. What can you say or do that will benefit them? If you don't do it, guess what? Somebody else might. And you may have missed out on an opportunity to express love through kindness. So if you're in crisis, I get it. Most of your conversation is probably going to be destructive. And I want you to move past this place, and you can do it through kindness. Warm emotions can be reborn in the relationship, but kind words and acts must precede those warm emotions. The next piece that I want you to engage in is humility. Look, it's easy to look back over the relationship and announce all of your righteous acts while you're overlooking all of your weaknesses. I'm talking to the narcissist here. All the I talk, it may be true, but it's not loving. Love will refuse to proclaim its own goodness. You can next express your love through courtesy. Listen, you don't have to treat each other rudely simply because you're separated or in this place of crisis. Sure, discuss the issues, but don't attack each other in the process. How did you treat them to get them? I want you to reflect back on that. That's what you got to return to. If you are all loving and kind and giving compliments and buying roses and doing sweet stuff, get back to doing that if you want to get this thing back on the right track. Forgetting. Oh, this is a good one, Santita. Replaying every event that hurt repeatedly is destructive and useless. I want you to perform an autopsy on the situation, but don't keep exhuming the body. No positive purpose is served by bringing up the details over and over and over again. Moving past the past is key. It's the key that opens up the future and brings reconciliation between you and your partner. I get it. You've been wronged, but remember, you've also wronged at some point in a relationship too. So we've got to move to the point of forgiving and, to some degree, forgetting. Finally, trust. Trust is an essential ingredient to unity. Can it be reborn? Yes, if integrity is reborn. Trust dies and integrity dies. Trust wasn't destroyed overnight, so again, don't expect it to be reborn overnight. Trust will be regained upon a record of integrity. So invite your significant other to investigate your behavior. And when they see your words and your actions are aligning, that's when trust will begin to grow. Love is always hopeful. Love your significant other in spite of what's occurred. Start listening more instead of talking. Start asking instead of demanding. And seek to understand instead of seeking to get your way. Love can be returned, you can be reconciled, and you can get that relationship train back on its track. And I believe you can close out the end of the year on the good foot as it relates to your relationship. Just keep loving and loving in the right way.
I love that. I love that. I love that. You know, because we nurse the hurt, right? And it's like, here you want to get to the healing. And you won't. It's like, when you gonna let this thing go? I mean, and then you get upset when folks go, I am out. Yeah. My middle name can't be MFer. Excuse my language. I mean, no. I mean, because you know. Come on, that's how we relate, right? You guys and everybody. We gotta stop at some point. That's why what's happening in the Middle East is so critical for all of us. It's a ceasefire. I don't care where the hurt began. Now everybody got to stop shooting.
That's right.
I didn't say shooting. I said shooting. Stop. You got to stop, because if you don't, it's never going to stop. Pastor Thurston, will you be doing your Facebook Live at 3:00 Central Time this week on Friday?
I will. 3:00 Central Time. Stephen Thurston, STEPHEN. Stephen Thurston on Facebook. We'll be diving into leadership. We've been in the relationship space the past few weeks, but we'll give you some leadership hints and tips this Friday to help you go in that space. The ultimate goal with Mirror Moments is to help you to change what's within so that you can change what's around and become a better version of yourself.
I love it. I love it. And you will be with us. Will you be in Chicago during the holidays? I mean, will you be preaching at New Covenant this weekend?
I will. New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church on 77 in Cottage Grove, where you can catch us on all of our social media platforms. Our worship is at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. We're done by 10:15, so pull up in person or log in online. We would love to have you with us.
Pastor Stephen Thurston, everybody, coming up. Dr. Shanita Knighton, if she can stay with you for just a few more minutes, we can talk about infection prevention and being healthy through this holiday season. But boy, is there a tie between the mind and the body and our health. You know, as a man thinketh, so is he. Oh, I think I said a little something, but I'm not a pastor. Pastor Stephen Thurston. Wow, I love it. I love you so much. Give my love to your mom and dad. My uncle and auntie. There you go. Love it. We go back a long way.
Long time.
Stay right here, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about President Biden becoming angry with his staff. He's frustrated with them. He said, "Look at my poll numbers. What are you doing?" Okay, you tell me what's going on. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT.
The Reverend's office, EPT.
Oh, okay. Dr. Knighton, thank you for being with me. I'm sorry I had to look. I've just had one of these mornings. Girl, not being able to see is a lot. The doctor said it was going to take a couple of months for this to get right, but wow, it is a lot. It is a lot. So anyway, but I'm going to have you on so you can give us a word on our health. Hello.
Sure.
I'm not even wearing my lashes today. Oh, I said, well, I'm going to take this down as much as I can. But let me say hello to everybody when they come on. And but how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Cannot complain. How are you?
Oh, girl, I'm gonna keep it moving. How about that? Keep this thing moving, honey. I'm gonna keep it moving. Keep it moving. So that's pretty much it for me. Keep it moving, because I'm moving right now, literally. That's right. So my place is in a state of I'm not gonna say collapse, because it's not collapse. It's I'm just dealing with a lot right now. With my moving is so hard. But it's given me an opportunity to get a lot of things together. So I can't complain. I cannot complain. Okay. And let me know when I have my people out, please.
All your guests are on.
Okay, we have Leslie. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, blessed holiday greetings to you in this wonderful. I'm the Christmas girl. I actually now have some earrings. My mother bought me a full complement of there's something I think putting on the Ritz. It's and I look like I am a gypsy. I'm not wearing them on the radio now.
You're styling.
Yeah. They're the largest. I'm wearing evergreen earrings, but as soon as I get off the air, she said you should wear them. 'Tis the season.
1 minute.
Great.
Well, I'm serious about that.
Of course, I'm Jewish, but I grew up Christmas, so I'm still a cultural Christmas celebrator. So we've got plenty of red and green. We've got a little Charlie Brown Peanuts tree in our living room, surrounded by all of our blue Hanukkah lights. So we do it all.
Well, look, I got to do it. And
30 seconds.
For us, it was always a religious holiday. It was taking on another tone, in my own celebrations of it. But girl, we have some fun. Love it.
Yes.
Love it.
Just went to the Sing Along Messiah yesterday.
10 seconds.
Wonderful.
Oh gosh, isn't that wonderful? It is wonderful. Dr. Gibbs and Daryl.
Good morning. Good morning, Santita.
Sending you so much love.
Good morning, Santita. Thank you.
Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. As we talk about President Biden and his reported frustrations with his White House staff about his little poll numbers. Before we get there, we're running just a little over today, but I've got Dr. Santita Knighton with us, world-renowned infection preventionist, college lecturer, wife, mom, someone who is keeping her kids well. That's right, which is so hard to do. How you doing, Dr. Knighton?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am doing well, Doctor. So talk to me. What do you want us to know in this season where people don't want a mask? And you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I don't either. Except for when I'm on a plane and in these really crowded spaces. But what do you want us to know?
I want to talk about briefly the topic of, and I know like we of course are dealing with like, let's say all of this rain and all of this snow, but just like wetness, like just in general. Mm-hmm. And so many people don't understand, but when you have, and I'm going to start specifically with hands, but I would really like to talk about laundry, okay? So bacteria, the transmission of bacteria is more likely to occur from wet skin than dry skin, which is why proper drying of the hands after washing has to be an important part of the process, okay? And while I understand, like, some people like to hurry up, wash their hands real quick, and those 20 to 25 seconds matter, but if you're not drying them, like I've seen people wash them real quick, turn the water off, and then shake them out, and then walk out of the bathroom, and then just say that their hands don't dry in the air, that's the worst way to pick up bacteria, because your hands are most vulnerable at that point for things to be able to stick to them and transmit to them. So it's very important that in order for you to remove bacteria effectively and have less contamination, you should dry your hands properly. It is also recommended that you dry your hands using single-use paper towels opposed to using the actual hand dryers in the restroom. Those electronic dryers actually harbor bacteria. Many people don't want to talk about it because they're convenient, but they actually end up sucking up a lot of germs in them. They're very rarely cleaned in regards to like the ones that you have to put your hands inside of. So if you have a choice between using paper towels to dry your hands and the convenience of an electronic machine, remember your hands when wet can harbor bacteria, so it's important for you to use the dry ones. Similarly with clothes, as many know, I love working out. But just reminding people that, you know, infections, talking about like, let's say like bacteria just in itself, many people like if like, let's say their clothes are moist because they just finished washing them, like you want the bacteria to all come off of your clothes, but that may not necessarily be the case even after you wash them. But it's even worse when you coming from a gym and let's say have gym clothes and you put the gym clothes, let's say, either in the hamper or you don't let them sit out and like air dry before putting them in the hamper, they can actually harbor bacteria. And so we're talking about things such as what we'll find in food. You know how they're talking about outbreaks with E. coli and salmonella and like even staph? You can find some of those germs inside of your clothing if you do not let them dry properly.
Oh my gosh. Do you need to clean out do you need to wash the washing machine?
Yes, and that right there, I'm laughing because it's not my area of expertise, but I'm standing next to the expert right now. But sanitizing the drums of the actual washing machines is important. I've witnessed and have seen them, like, let's say, collect mold. I've seen, like, let's say, dirt that's around the top rim of them for some of the top loaders. And so I actually make sure that I physically clean around that area because I see that it collects dust. But I also utilize the sanitation cycles that are on the machines as well. And people should know that they actually have them on there for a reason. most machines come with a manual that actually tells you how often you should be sanitizing those machines.
Well, no one's reading that, but you keep reminding us that we
I know.
should.
I try to at least do once. I at least do, for me, I know, and it might be maybe not enough, but I do once a month.
Oh, okay. Thank you for making me feel so good. But I do clean out my machine and my dishwasher and things like that. But I grew up with a grandmother who was a germaphobe. She worked in the hospital, and she felt that everything was nasty. So there you go. And I guess she was right. Things are not sanitized. And she was on the cutting edge of that more than half a century ago. Thank you, Grandmother Gertrude. It turns out she was right. But for us, particularly, in the Black community, you always heard cleanliness is next to godliness. So poverty was never the excuse not to be clean, right? So you were always, you walk into a house, and even the most humble home, you could eat off the floor because no one played that. So sending you so much love, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. HEYDRNINA. That's her handle on social media at HEYDRNINA. Thank you for being with us today. You can hang out and listen to us because that's what she does. She doesn't hang up anybody. She listens to the rest of the show. And I'm flattered by that. I love it. Dr. Shanita Knighton, world-renowned infection preventionist and registered nurse. Let me tell you a little story. I was reading this article. I love to read, and I had to have someone read it to me because everybody. I've had an eye procedure and I've been recovering. But oh boy, after a point, I had to pull this thing right up on my nose so I could read this, which is what I'm about to do right now. From the Washington Post, the headline says Biden said to be increasingly frustrated by dismal poll numbers. By Tyler Pager. The night before President Biden departed Washington to celebrate Thanksgiving on Nantucket, Massachusetts, he gathered his closest aides for a meeting in the White House residence. After pardoning a pair of turkeys, an annual White House tradition, Biden delivered some stern words for the small group assembled. His poll numbers were unacceptably low, and he wanted to know what his team and his campaign were doing about it. He complained.
Should be, well, it's crazy because I know one of them is a.
Wait a minute. Oh, that's all right, honey. I was like, wait a minute. He complained that his economic message had done little to move the ball, even as the economy was growing and unemployment was falling. According to people familiar with his comments, who spoke on the condition, of course, of anonymity. For months, the president and his first lady, Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, have told aides and friends they are frustrated by the president's less than stellar approval rating, and on and on and on it went. But can you imagine? I know the staff were horrified. They went in there, and of course they're the big cheese. They're called in at the White House to go and sit with the president, and he gives them a stern rebuke. He is like, "What is up with my poll numbers?" The poll numbers clearly not. What is going on? And they said he's growing increasingly frustrated, and I think we need to dig down deep on this. Attorney Darrell Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, brilliant civil rights and voting rights attorney. Leslie Williams, of course, from Jewish Voice for Peace. And of course, I met you through our brothers and sisters at If Not Now. I'm so glad that you're with us today once again. And of course, let me start with you, Dr. David Gibbs, professor of history at the University of Arizona. Because I think that his tough time with the polls did not begin recently. I mean, let's go back 4 years. 4 years ago, right now, people were asking him to get out the race because he was not a strong candidate. And he remained a lackluster, not strong candidate. It's just that when we got to the fall, we said it's him or Trump. So, and it seems like he's never been able to get his footing. Or am I misreading this, Dr. Gibbs?
I think there are a lot of reasons that he's unpopular. One is, as you said, he's really never been that strong or charismatic a candidate. And he was accepted, I think, at the last moment by the party just because they made a cold calculation that he was the only one who could block Bernie Sanders from being the nominee, who was, I think, the most likely to be the nominee had the party not drawn together and decided on Biden. And so, you have a figure who's fundamentally just not really that popular. It never has been that popular. But I think the more significant variable here is the state of the economy. And even though Biden and, figures in the press like Paul Krugman, who increasingly are acting as shills for Biden, even as they say the economy is great, it's really not that great. If you look at the numbers on wages, on compensation, it's tracking below the rate of inflation. Inflation has come down, but what you had is a large amount of inflation in the first years of the Biden presidency, even if it's now come down. And, that eroded living standards for people. And living standards haven't recovered. And people notice that. People notice that your living standards are not what they were 5 years ago. It is a fact that most people see their living standards as having been better under Trump. Now, I think Trump got lucky in that respect. I don't think that was any extraordinary competence on his part. But nevertheless, that's what voters look at. They look at, we were better off under Trump than we are under Biden, and our situation economically has gotten worse under Biden. That's true of everybody. Everybody who works for a living, everybody who's not really affluent and has accumulated wealth, they're very worried about living standards. And I think, pundits and academics sometimes forget about that detail.
You have a caller.
For most people. So I think that's the basic problem for Biden is the economy. In 1992, Bill Clinton, when he was running for president the first time, he had in his campaign headquarters a poster, I think James Carville put it up, that said, "It's the economy, stupid," meaning that's what people are most worried about is the economy. And I think what many people who study election polls have concluded is that it's always the economy, stupid. That's what people are really concerned about first and foremost is the economy. And so I think that's what's really weighing upon Biden's credibility here more than any other factor. I think another factor I would add is the perception that he's been something of a disaster in foreign policy. Now, generally speaking, again, the Democratic perception, the perception of people in the Democratic National Committee and the reality, I think, are very much out of kilter here. The Democratic elite believe that Biden's been a great success in foreign policy. But if you look at his record, if you look at the record of his decline of popularity, the real turning point was the U.S. departure, the disastrous U.S. departure from Afghanistan. And that created a perception of incompetence and inability. If you look at the videos of the U.S. departure from Afghanistan, they look awful. It looks like the U.S. defeat in Vietnam, the U.S. departure from Saigon in 1995. And that was not a good look, and that was not a good reality. And I think that the war in Ukraine, the American decision to go to the mat, so to speak, in terms of defeating Russia, which has gone very badly indeed, that also has not helped Biden. The war in the Middle East and the U.S. unquestioning support for Israel has not helped Biden. So I think, and so many factors, basically, there's a perception that Biden has performed poorly as a president. And one could make an argument that objectively he has performed poorly as a president. And I think that's why he's not very popular.
And others are saying this massive hit that he has taken, as you just said, Dr. Gibbs, in foreign policy, particularly as it relates to, most acutely, the Middle East. I mean, there are all kinds of nicknames for him, Genocide Joe, and things like that. I mean, it's painful to hear. Well, it's painful that we have about 20,000 dead Palestinians since October 7th, not to mention those who are under the rubble. So, let me ask you, Leslie Williams. I mean, Dr. Leslie, examine this patient. I mean, because these stern words, you can imagine being at the White House and the closest people get called in. So, you're the big people in the White House. Look, even the mess hall in the White House is like a luxury restaurant, everybody. When you are at the White House, you are at the apex. And so when the president calls you, you are at the apex. He calls you in and reads you the riot act. Oh.
Well, I've got to say that I find that kind of amusing since we now know that many of Biden staffers, as well as congressional staffers and members of the Department of Homeland Security and many other agencies have been telling him for the past 2 months that his policy in Gaza is misguided and that he is ignoring the will of the people by continuing to single-handedly support Israel. So I don't think he should be blaming his staff. I mean, I think he should be looking at his own actions and his own unwillingness to acknowledge that a significant portion of the American public thinks that what he is doing in Gaza is terrible. We know there are polls showing that over 60% of the American public want there to be a ceasefire. But I think, particularly in terms of Biden's base, and I am not a political expert, so I will yield to the other people on your panel who are on that. But we know, for example, that last month, the Black Christian faith leaders took out a full-page ad in the New York Times pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza. And that had 900 Black Christian faith leaders on it representing Black churches around the country. And we know that the Black Church PAC has said that their endorsement of Biden was contingent on promises that they feel he has not kept, such as the failure to pass the federal voting rights bill and the failure to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So with those other broken promises and now this refusal to acknowledge the human rights disaster that he is really promoting in Gaza, he is at risk of losing the Black vote, certainly the young Black vote. College students, both Black and non-Black college students, overwhelmingly support ending the war in Gaza. Of all of the protests that have been held, the pro-Palestinian protests that have been held since October, 28% of those, over 650 protests, have been on college campuses. And we've seen a lot of them in HBCUs. There are major ones at Howard, for example.
Thank you.
And a lot of, sorry, go ahead.
My school. Howard University.
Sorry.
That's
yeah,
spot.
Go ahead.
No, that's my spot. I just had to give love to Howard University.
Yes.
Had to give it love.
So we're seeing that some of his key constituencies, African Americans, young people, and of course Arab Americans, are extremely distressed by this. And you're hearing more and more of those people saying that they cannot bring themselves to vote for Biden next year. Now, you know, we've got over 10 months before the election, and it's quite possible that people will make the calculation that as much as they dislike Biden, they're going to vote for Trump. But he has some pretty narrow margins in places like Michigan. And given the large numbers of Arab American voters and Black voters in some of those swing states, I think that if he doesn't make an about face on his Gaza policy, he could risk having some of those voters simply not go to the polls or simply not vote for president next year.
Well, you know, I have to give you a little bit of pushback. I think you have excellent analysis. When you say that you're not an expert, you become an expert when you get in that polling booth. So I think we need to stop selling. No, we need to stop selling ourselves short. Because Leslie, Daryl, Dr. Gibbs, you know how you feel. You know what you believe when you go to that polling booth. I was just reading an NBC News story late last night, or late this morning, you know, about they were talking to young people. They said, you know what? Game changer. What he's done in the Middle East, I cannot vote for him. Does that mean I'm going to sit home? No, it means I'm not going to vote for him. I mean, people are saying that. And I've heard more and more young people say, I'm not going to continue to reward the Democratic Party when you don't do what I asked you to do, what I sent you to do. So no, people keep saying, oh, they're going to sit home. They're not going to do anything. Oh, no. You're going to see protests happen in a whole different way, Leslie. Because
I think that's true.
You know, because the people behind us have another view. They're like, freedom, you know, what did Chris Christopherson wrote in Me and Bobby McGee? Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. That's real.
Yeah. Well, I think also choosing not to vote is, for some people, a choice. You know, for a very long time, the Democratic Party has taken Black voters for granted. It's really taken people of color for granted. But if you feel that you can't choose the Republican Party for obvious reasons, but then you feel that the Democratic Party isn't doing any better, you can make the choice to say, I'm not going to support either of you. And that is a choice. So I don't think staying home is necessarily a sign of laziness or apathy. I mean, I think for a lot of people, it can be a principled way of saying, I cannot support either of these regimes because in terms of what they're doing for people of color, what they're doing for marginalized people, including for Palestinians, they're the same. And we know that the Democratic and Republican parties have been completely in lockstep over supporting Israel for decades. But I think, the brutality of this assault on Gaza, the fact that you're seeing so much of it in people's social media feeds on TikTok, on Instagram, is really bringing home to people just how brutal and inhumane the occupation of Palestine has always been. So there are a lot of young people who are really waking up to that, who are going to be voting, who are registering to vote. And of course, a lot of young Jewish people, the people that are in Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, who are also very active voters. So I think this is a major concern for Biden and the Democratic Party, and that he needs to address it.
Well, Daryl Jones, what do you say? I mean, because you and Barbara Arnwine are our foremost voting rights advocates. And I think people are going to vote. I just don't know which way they're going to go because they are quite upset. Attorney Daryl Jones.
And good morning, Santita. I agree with both Dr. Gibbs as well as what Leslie Williams have been laying out with regards to, particularly the young folks, our young voters, and where they stand. You got to remember that, the young voters really were a large part of what put President Biden in office. And he was not necessarily their first choice. He was their best alternative. Mm. And so when you come in, as the best alternative and not the first choice, the expectations of you are going to be high because, they know that you're a compromised president. That's why they're voting for you. You were better than the alternative. We didn't necessarily care for all of your policies, but we're going to buy and invest in the fact that you're going to carry forward, knowing that we're voting for you, that you're going to invest and stand for some of the issues for which the young voters stand. And I think that when you're coming in with that type of baggage, if you will, that type of understanding that you're not necessarily their first choice, and then you throw them into this Ukraine and the Gaza Strip issue where you're going directly against their interests. That's a lot for young voters to absorb. The question is, where are you on justice and policing on the George Floyd Act? It's not there. So they're seeing all these shortages of what they wanted from you, and they're not receiving them, and you're not their first choice anyway. So, that's part of what the administration is facing. And then, when you layer onto that, when you go beyond just the young voters, when you layer onto that what is it, some 76% of the Democrats support the ceasefire, and he's against it. 61% of likely voters overall support the ceasefire, and the president has really staked out this position, has wedded himself to the Israeli government with regards to not supporting the ceasefire. That's problematic.
Wait a minute, to the right-wing Israeli government.
Yes.
To the right wing.
To that far right,
to say that.
Netanyahu. Mm-hmm. So you have all of this that's in play. And then you throw on top of that, this whole Hunter Biden thing, whether or not there's any, merit to it or not. This is yet another layer of questions, of problems, of issues that are existing for the existing president. So for the poll numbers to be low at this point, they're low for, I believe, those reasons. Perhaps they'll turn around as things, begin to shake out a little more, and it becomes very real as to who the two candidates are, or very actualized as to who the two candidates are. But right now, the poll numbers are reflecting how people are feeling about the administration, and that's accepting the positive things that have occurred from this administration, meaning accepting their fight for the loan forgiveness for student debt, accepting the appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson, accepting all those positive things, HBCU funding being at an all-time high, accepting all those things, these core policies that these young folks and other voters will stand for. They remain problematic for this president at this point in time, Santita.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Gibbs, I've got about a minute here. It turns out that the United Nations has a ceasefire resolution that the United States is trying to weaken. I'm like, are they tone deaf? I mean, they object to the proposed call for, quote, an urgent and sustainable cessation of hostilities. What are they do? What are they thinking? Dr. Gibbs, 1 minute for you.
There's an extraordinary rigidity on U.S. policy toward Israel that, the United States is going to fund. And again, I keep emphasizing this, that since 1971, the U.S. has funded the Israeli military to the tune of several $1 billion a year, every year. It's, one of the biggest, maybe the biggest foreign aid program in history. And they do it no matter what Israel does. And, in public, the United States has this fig leaf that the U.S. is critical of Israel in terms of its disproportionate, bombing of civilians, the horrific effects of these bombings of civilians that are taking place in Gaza, the nearly 20,000 people killed, all the children killed. These are mildly criticized by American officials, but they never do anything about it. They don't say to Israel, you either stop doing this or we will cut your aid off. They don't do that. Or they don't just cut their aid off, which is what they should do, in my view. And so there's really no sense of the United States having any accountability with regard to the policy in the Middle East, or Israel being forced to have accountability. And the result is the horrific results that we're seeing now in Gaza, which seem to be going on. And this is blocking any effort to ameliorate those horrific results. They're blocking a ceasefire, effectively. And and that contributes also, I think, to the perception that Biden is going to be very weakened among young people who do not appreciate these kinds of things.
Well, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Call us at Dynamo Dave. I'm going to get to you. 773-763-9278. Let's talk about it. 773-763-WCPT. Please put Rainbow Push under your Christmas tree. Help us as we seek to help you, everybody. Call us at 773-FREEDOM. In the meantime, call me right now at 763-WCPT. Let's talk about President Biden's poll numbers. He might not be putting a public face on this, but he's very, very concerned, and he is on his staff's back to make things right. But do they have the power to do that, or does he? Back aboard with Santita Jackson for just a minute. Well, you guys, we'll keep on talking because we are on the air. Well, we're on, what is it? All these other things, but what a fine mess, Ali. What was it, Laurel and Hardy? You just sit there and you're like, are you serious right now? He's just they're trying to. What do you make of them trying to weaken this UN resolution, Leslie?
Well, this is nothing new. The two main ways that the United States has always supported Israel. One is obviously the money, the fact that we give them $3 to $4 billion a year in foreign military financing, but it's also in being the diplomatic support at the United Nations. So the U.S. has many, many times when there have been attempts to bring Israel before the International Criminal Court, the United States has always blocked that. The United States has blocked many other resolutions that have done things like condemn settlement expansion. So this is not at all surprising. This is standard practice for the United States. But we were talking a little bit earlier about the funding, and there are laws in place. There are a series of laws called the Leahy laws, which state that the United States should not give money to countries which violate human rights. And yet Israel has always been given kind of a major pass on that. And a few years ago, Senator Betty McCollum in Minnesota introduced a bill that would ensure that U.S. funding cannot be used for Israel's ill treatment of Palestinian children by putting them into military prisons, which they do, to forcibly displace Palestinians from their homes or illegally annex Palestinian land. And yet she has never been able to get more than, I think, about 20 or 30 congresspeople on that bill. So it's clear that, this Democratic-Republican consensus on supporting Israel no matter what is very long-standing, but people are beginning to wake up and say, "Wait, why should we?"
Your next guest's phone goes straight to voicemail.
Violating human rights, even though our own laws say that we should not be given money to countries that violate human rights.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? Because I mean, it's taken as an article of faith that if you go against the Israeli lobby, that's been the case for about 50 years, your career will be destroyed. I mean, I think Reverend Jackson's strength within the Black community, and quite frankly, within his constituency, saved him during the 84 and 88 campaigns. But they went all out, the right wing, to destroy Reverend's campaign. I mean, that's just the reality. They did do that. And it was just something that was like, whew, it was a lot.
I think that the Israel lobby is extraordinarily influential, and it's extraordinarily broad. I mean, apart from the Jewish aspect to it, there's also the evangelical Christian aspect, the Christian Zionists, as they're called. That's a huge number of people right there. There's the military-industrial complex of the United States, which is closely integrated with its Israeli counterpart, and that's another source of influence. Mm-hmm. There's the perception of Israel as America's outpost in the Middle East, as sort of an instrument of American power, as sort of a military adjunct to the United States in that zone of the world. And so I think there are all of these multiple reasons why the Israel lobby has a lot of influence. And the results have been as we've seen them, that we have this sort of unshakable bipartisan, very much bipartisan support for Israel. People talk about the sort of bitterness of the party divides, how much we all hate each other. And to a large extent, it's true on most issues, but there's certain foreign policy issues, most notably U.S. support of Israel, that is quite bipartisan. The number of dissenters from this in either party is really very small. And now that may change now with the Gaza war. That may gradually change. As so many things are starting to go off the rails, this may go off the rails as well. But the stability of American support for Israel by both parties over the last 50 years has been extraordinarily impressive.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi once said that the apocalypse would happen before the Democratic Party stopped supporting Israel.
Well, Pentecost, it's almost here. I don't. And oh my goodness, I see. Are those swallows? No, they're locusts. I don't know. I don't know if the policies are going to change anytime soon. But I can't say that because the people change things. People said that about Vietnam. It's an intractable war. We're not going to leave. Dr. King was ultimately killed over that. When he finished his anti-Vietnam speech at Riverside Church, Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, his chief of staff, walked up to him and said, "Martin," because he really labored over giving this speech because he knew that this was going to be it for him because blacks were already turning their backs on him. He was hemorrhaging popularity. But Reverend Dr. Walker walked up to him and said, "Martin, you just signed your death warrant." And Dr. King looked at him and said, "I know." But it was the right thing to do. He was killed. Leslie, Dr. Gibbs, and Darrell, 1 year to the day, to the minute he stepped to the rostrum in Riverside Church. 1 year to the day, to the minute, just after 6 p.m. in New York City, April 4th, 1967, just after 6 p.m., April 4th, 1968, is when he was killed. Hey, yeah. I'm just saying. I mean, it just some point.
But I talked about this a bit.
30 seconds
on the show.
Hold on. Why don't you make your point when we come back on, because we got like 20 seconds.
Okay, sure.
Okay, sure. Somebody, let me know if we get Bronco Marketich, okay?
Yeah, her phone goes straight to his phone goes straight to voicemail.
Okay, well, just keep trying. Just let me know. But we've got a great conversation here. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive from 2 to 5 p.m.
Stand by.
Matter. You're listening to WCPT.
can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Tuesday, October, goodness gracious, it's December 19th, 2023. Sending you so much love today. Hey everybody, we're talking about President Biden's polling numbers and why. Well, actually, it's this Washington Post article, and many articles are derived from it, in which they said, just after he pardoned the turkeys, he pulled his closest aides into his office and said, hey, what are you doing? Why are my poll numbers so low? And so we've been trying to tease out with Leslie Williams, some Jewish voice for peace, and Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, and the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones. Just why we're looking at what we're looking at. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about this. Because now you have young people who are saying there is no way that I'm going to vote for him. No way I'm going to vote for him. Not just because of the Middle East, but because of the voting rights that have not been protected, but because of the justice and policing. So much. And I just, in my 20s, I'm not wedded to either party. See, that's what we don't miss that about these young people. They're wedded to an American that they want to see, not an American that already is. They are in another space. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're thinking. They're not afraid of whoever comes up, whoever wins in 2024, because they know they're going to have to hit the streets anyway. Let's just get to some of these headlines so we can get to the rest of this show. Everybody, call me, though, at 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts. Pope Francis will allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. The Vatican approved the blessings yesterday, but said they must be kept separate from marriage. It largely reverses a ban that was formalized in 2021. The Catholic Church, which has 1.3 billion adherents all around the world, has previously said that any nod in the same to same-sex unions would be tantamount to blessing sin. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill allowing police to arrest migrants. An earthquake in northwestern China has killed at least 116 people. Everybody praying for our brothers and sisters in China. And Marvel star Jonathan Majors was found guilty in a domestic abuse crisis. The Marvel franchise has already dropped him. And Chicago will have a high of 32 degrees. Winter is here, everybody. Ooh. And it is sunny outside and will be today. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 36 degrees, partly sunny. In the NFL, what a game last night. If you missed that finish, you missed something else. Seahawks 20, the Eagles 17. Oh my gosh, what a game, what a game, what a game. In the NBA, the Bulls 108, the 76ers 104, the Timberwolves 112, and the Heat 108. In the NHL, the Avalanche will be playing Chicago, and the Penguins were triumphant over the Wild 4-3. Those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Everybody, if you want to own a home, Team Hochberg is giving you a new opportunity. It is cost prohibitive to own a home, to buy a home in the United States today. In 99% of the counties all across the country, people cannot afford to buy a home. Can you imagine? Absolutely. So Team Hochberg has come up with something, because they said, pulling together 20% of $200,000, $300,000, even $100,000 is a whole lot to ask of people today. So they've come up with a program. It's not 20% that you need to pull together, not even 10, not even 5, but 1%. Can you imagine only needing 1% to buy a home? Yeah, to make the down payment, and no private mortgage insurance. I want you to call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and find out what this program is about. Tell your coworkers, everyone within the sound of my voice on this on this radio station at AM 950 Radio, I want you to call 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and find out about this program. Not 20%, not 10%, not even 5%, 1%. That is all you would need to pull together if you qualify for this program. And guess what? You might even have a credit score that's low. Okay, that can happen. They have a secured credit card that you can buy that you load money onto it every month, and if you pay the bill at the end of the month, slowly and steadily over the next year, you will see, over the next months, you will see your credit score rise. Using your debit card does not do anything to your credit score, but using a credit card does do that. So call them and find out about their financial products. They want to help you to get your piece of the American dream. Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. Can you imagine only needing 1% down to get a home in the United States? They figured out a way for you. Call them today at 855-56-DAVID or go to 56david.com. But I find that when you talk to people, you can get so much more. Call them today. Everybody, let's talk about Biden's frustrations, by his dismal poll numbers. He is looking at his staff and he's saying, what are you going to do? And the question is, what can you do? John Nichols comes up at the bottom of the hour. His latest piece in the Nation is Biden's decision to skip New Hampshire is political malpractice. Grassroots Democrats can save him with a write-in campaign, but avoiding this battleground state, avoiding these debates, y'all, that is not smart. And we'll have to see what Dean Phillips is going to do. You never know in politics, and like life. Don't count your eggs, count your chickens before they hatch, because you just don't know. We've got Leslie Williams from Jewish Voice for Peace, who's saying she's not an expert. She sounded like one to me, and everyone becomes an expert when you get in that polling booth. How about that piece? Dr. David Gibbs I'm serious, Dr. David Gibbs from, of course, historian from the University of Arizona, and of course, brilliant civil rights attorney and voting rights attorney. Attorney Darrell Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. You were making a point during the break, Leslie.
Well, yeah, we were talking about Dr. King and how after he made the speech at Riverside Baptist Church about Vietnam, about how he began to lose influence, lose popularity.
Your guest is on.
And
he'd been losing it before. Let me just say, he'd been losing it before, but this was like the nail in the coffin.
That was like the watershed, right?
Oh, yeah. He couldn't get into pulpits. He was thinking of leaving the movement and trying to become president of Morehouse. He said, maybe I'm in the way, Yes.
But I think one thing that is really critical to understand about what's going on now, and this is something that I talked about a bit the last time on your show, is the strong connection between African Americans and Palestinians, and really between several minority groups in the United States and Palestinians. So African Americans, first of all, the most recent polls show that as opposed to Black support for Biden being at 90% in 2020, it's only at about 63% right now. And the Black Church PAC has said that they are not sure yet if they are going to endorse him in the upcoming election. And that is amazingly significant. But ever since the Ferguson to Palestine movement, we've seen connections between African Americans protesting against police violence and Palestinians protesting against Israeli violence in their communities. And this goes all the way back to the late stages of the civil rights movement, when African Americans saw the Palestinian cause as part of the global movement of people of color against Europe.
A second caller.
And I think that's often overlooked. And also, obviously, Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, Muslim Americans feel a strong connection to Palestinians. But many Latino groups do as well. They feel the same connection with a group of people who are frequently kicked off their land. Native Americans, this Thanksgiving, several Native Americans held a day of recognition of indigenous people and included Palestine, and specifically called out Palestine as Palestinians as a fellow group of people who were being pushed off their land by colonialists. So there's this growing coalition of different groups of people of color that have traditionally been strong supporters of the Democratic Party, who are very angry right now and feeling very disillusioned and as though they don't really have a place to go in this upcoming election. And people are also saying things like...
And you're not going to tell them, you're not going to frighten them with Trump. That's not happening. You know,
I think what a lot of them feel is, are you really any better than Trump for us? Yeah. And are we going to continue to throw a group of our siblings under the bus by saying, well, at least it's better than Trump, so Palestinians, too bad, we're just going to forget about you. And then I think more and more, a lot of these younger people, particularly young people of color, are not going to do that. And they're also saying, how is it that you can find $14 billion to send to fight the war in Israel, but you can't find enough money for healthcare in the United States or for education in the United States, but you're suddenly able to pull out $14 billion to send to Israel? I think that's also a strong message that has got a lot of young people extremely angry.
Well, absolutely. Branko Markovic joins us, and I'm so glad that you're with us. I was reading some of your writings on, just responsible statecraft, which is like one of my favorite news outlets. But of course, he's a staff writer for Jacobin. I love them. I am a subscriber. Yes, I am. He's a Goodman Institute fellow in These Times magazine and the author of, oh boy, Yesterday's Man, the case against Joe Biden. Should we begin there? Oh, because some people are saying that it's the Middle East that is doing Joe Biden in. He's certainly on his staff's back. But you're saying that, U.S. is taking a massive global hit over their standing in Israel. Americans feel negative about Biden's economy because there's a lot to feel negative about. Dr. Branko, talk to me. That's right, Lizzie, all of you are doctors today, along with Dr. David Gibbs, who's a legit doctor. Tell me, look at this patient, and you've already done that with your book. What's going on? Because he is upset with his staff right now. He's very warm with them. He's like, come on, you guys. Make this happen. Can they?
Yeah, I was struck by that recent Washington Post piece that talked about some of the kind of behind-the-scenes reactions to Biden's poor polling. I think it opens with Biden telling his staff, that he's dismayed by his poll numbers, number one, and then basically tasking them to figure out what he needs to do to get them back. And to me, it points to a White House that is just very out of touch with what is going on in the country. You hear it constantly on cable news and, among Biden's strategists that talk to the press about what his strategy for 2024 is. And the thing you constantly hear is that they believe that their ticket to victory is basically telling people how great things are, that people just don't really know how much Biden has accomplished. That's the reason why his poll numbers are so bad. And I think it completely ignores the many, many statistics we have. If you look outside of things like GDP, if you look outside of things like unemployment, which are good, but those only tell part of the story of this economy. We just saw the other day that homelessness in the United States has dramatically risen over the past year. I think 12%. Very, very big jump. We had a report earlier this year that child poverty made a historic leap as well. You've got rents that are at record highs around the country. You've had evictions rising to higher than their pre-pandemic level. You've also got food insecurity, which is higher this year than it has been for the last few years. These are just a few statistics I'm throwing out, but there's so many. What it suggests is that even though on the grand scale, if you look at the big picture, yes, the economy is doing well. It's the same problem as it was under Trump, and it's the same problem that you had under Obama when the economic recovery was happening, which is that, yes, the economy can be doing well, but how is it being distributed? Are those gains actually being meted out equally? And I think the clear answer is no. So, you've got the economic picture. You've got, Biden not really running on anything. He's not really, his Build Back Better bill, which is meant to be the centerpiece of his entire presidency, and his FDR-style ambitions, that died. There appears to be no attempt to revive it. Biden barely mentions the very popular provisions that were in it when he's been in the campaign trail. It's mostly about, how well his presidency has gone and the bills that he has passed. There's no promise to sort of continue the fight to pass some of these things that didn't happen in his first term. And meanwhile, as you say, the situation in Gaza just there's on the political level, there's no upside for Biden here, not getting any Republican votes for his very close, bear hugging of Netanyahu and this government and giving them a green light to do whatever. Meanwhile, he is alienating large portions of his base, not just young people, but also Arab American, Muslim American voters in key states. And then there was a recent poll. They've been doing polls throughout this period, but the Arab Barometer survey that looked at attitudes in Tunisia, which is a fairly pro-Western country, but nevertheless tends to kind of be a bit of a bellwether for the entire region, for the Middle East, the wider Middle East. And they found that this war and U.S. support for it has actually done more damage to the standing of the United States than it has for Israel. And basically they say, if you look at how previous trends have gone, you can extrapolate this probably to the wider Middle East. So overall, I think, there are a lot of bad decisions being made in this White House that are not just bad for the United States, but also bad for Biden's presidency. And the fact that they don't know or they can't tell what is going wrong for them, I think speaks to a real detachment from things on the ground in this country.
Well, let's go back to your book, The Case Against Joe Biden. Make a connection, please.
Well, I tried to warn people in advance of the primaries that look, Biden, however you feel about him as a personality, he has a political career that is pockmarked with all sorts of red flags. He's not just a conservative Democrat, but he's someone who has always kind of very willingly taken the path of least resistance as a politician. He's someone who, rather than fight or challenge the right, he to try and find accommodation with them. His biggest legislative accomplishments in the Senate over his 35 or so years in that institution were actually right-wing ones. It was things like the crime bill, and it was things like making sentences for drugs much tougher. It was not really progressive victories, and I think aside from there have been some bright spots. I don't want to totally paint his administration as devoid of accomplishments. I think the stimulus, obviously, that passed in 2021 was huge. I think the withdrawal from Afghanistan was really important. And I think parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, parts of it are important. But also a lot of what he's passed is kind of has been sort of traditional Republican kind of aims. I mean, people forget that the infrastructure bill that he passed, that was originally kind of a Trump idea, especially paying for it by basically privatizing or outsourcing large parts of American infrastructure to Wall Street to slap on all sorts of fees and that kind of thing on there. That was a Trump bill initially that was very heavily criticized.
Well,
unfortunately, yeah.
No, I mean, because I think, I didn't know what you were about to say, unfortunately, because I think that many of us forget just how centrist or so really how far to the right he is in the party itself. I mean, coming on, with his support of the police, anti-busing and all of that. And everybody gets upset with me, Bronco, when I mention these things, but I'm like, but this is the guy who we put on, someone who was really struggling 4 years ago And he struggled in 1988. I mean, he's always had a tough time as a presidential candidate. I mean, mastered the Senate, right? But the presidency, the mastery of it has somehow eluded him, Bronco.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth knowing in pretty much every Senate campaign, aside from his first one, Biden won by constantly lurching to the right of his Republican opponent. That was a strategy. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the presidency, he has not, fared particularly well. I mean, the 2020 election obviously is an exception, but from what I read about what Biden world people are telling themselves, that they, in their view, that the reason Biden won 2020 was because he was so underrated and he had these particular political strengths as a candidate that no one saw coming. To me, that's a complete rewriting of history. I mean, people forget the number one, that Barack Obama involved himself in the Democratic primary, moved heaven and earth basically to make Biden the only challenger to Bernie Sanders, and to basically consolidate the centrist vote around him.
You are the
Biden
diplomat.
got very lucky.
You're the diplomat. They pushed Bernie out the race.
Yeah, I mean,
Stay right there.
Definitely.
Let me go to this break. Let me bring up John Nichols, but you stay right there. Look, I'll say it. They pushed Bernie out the race. And this is the most popular elected official in the United States today. That was what you call dumb. Yeah, I said it. And I'm not being diplomatic about it, because look at the mess that we're in right now. Trump is being fast-tracked to the White House. That has me upset. Really. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Bronco, don't you leave yet. Don't you dare leave. Stay right there. John Nichols coming up back in just a minute. You all talk amongst yourselves. I'm really moving today. All right. I'm moving today, and my movers just got here, so let me talk to them. I'll be right back. You all keep talking. This is Leslie Williams from Jewish Voice for Peace, Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, and Daryl Jones, chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition. I'll be back in literally 60 seconds. You all talk. Okay. Tino? Oh, honey, I'm sorry.
Bronco, do you see a way that that Biden can regain some of the trust from the young voters and move himself from that, the middle class Joe tag that he has?
Can you win back younger voters? I mean, I think, you can probably do a lot to win back a lot of people, but the thing is, I don't really see any effort being made to do that. I mean, I was reading this New York Magazine piece about, supposedly it's a behind-the-scenes look at what the strategy is of Biden world 2024. And their assumption seems to be that basically once voters see Trump and once it's a head-to-head matchup and, once abortion is on the ballot and so on and so forth, voters will just automatically flock back to Biden because they'll see how bad Trump is. And to me, we've tried that already. That happened in 2016. That was the assumption in 2016, and that didn't really work out. The one time that Trump was beaten, Biden ran on a fairly ambitious platform and made a bunch of promises, some of which he fulfilled. And I think that was key. And also, by the way, he had, a world historic crisis on his hands. So, I think he can, but I don't think he's making really an effort to at this point to try and win the bag.
Do you see
anyone in the Democratic? Do you see anyone in the Democratic Party as being a reasonable challenger if he can be convinced to step down?
That's a good question. I mean, the longer this, if he does not step down, I don't really see. You have to with a politician, you have to have time to introduce him to the public. You have to. Spend a while campaigning. It's all, you have to put together a campaign infrastructure. It's all this stuff. I mean, that's not just something that you can kind of do, at the drop of a hat. So, I'm not sure who they would run. I mean, I think they have an actual, fairly deep bench of people they could draw on, but you can't just kind of, quickly replace a presidential candidate and then just assume it'll go totally fine. So,
do you all know John Nichols?
You thought
I think John Nichols is here. John Nichols?
Hello, I am here.
Well, lest everyone think that I'm giving this man a really hard time today. John Nichols' article in the Nation is Biden's decision to skip New Hampshire is political malpractice. Bronco, he's sounding like you. But Dr. Gibbs, you were about to ask Bronco something.
Well, I was interested that, Bronco, you've sort of stuck your neck out, and in my view, a good way, on the issue of Ukraine. That was something for a long time. You were kind of a lonely voice on that issue. Do you see
30 seconds.
The Ukraine war as playing much of a role in the election? I suppose one of the things that's occurring what I'm seeing.
Hold on. Why don't you ask that when we get back on before we bring up John?
All right, sure.
Okay,
sure.
Absolutely. Because you did brilliant writings, and we were lone voices over here, Bronco.
10 seconds.
Dr. Gibbs, Bryce Green, and I, we were alone with you.
Stand by. Stand by.
We're coming up.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Oh boy, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, John Nichols is here with us as he is every Tuesday at this time. And his Nation magazine article is wow, it's a wonderful piece. It's really provocative, it's thought-provoking. Biden's decision to skip New Hampshire's political malpractice. Ouch. So we're going to be talking about that as we're talking about Biden's frustrations with his staff, with his top-tier staff, campaign and White House staff, about his low polling numbers. But we've been trying to analyze how we got here. And there are reasons why we are where we are with him. Cornel West is saying that he should have an LBJ moment and leave the race maybe in the spring. Do you think that's going to happen? Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Of course, we've got Leslie Williams from Jewish Voice for Peace giving us some excellent analysis, I must say. Attorney Darrell Jones, excellent analysis from everyone here on this panel. Transformative Justice Coalition Chair, and of course, Dr. David Gibbs, brilliant historian from the University of Arizona. And we have been so excited to have Bronco Markatish from In These Times and Jacobin Magazine. I urge you to support those magazines because they really give us some of the best reporting that is out here. And as we're joined by this heretic, also known as my friend and brother beloved, John Nichols. Before I get to you, John Nichols, Dr. Gibbs was asking a really thought-provoking question of Bronco. Dr. Gibbs?
Yes. Well, one of the things that we've been talking about on this show for many months now, and Bronco has been writing about for a while as well, is the Ukraine war, and the with critiques of how this war basically has reflected very poorly on the Biden administration. That opportunities for peace were passed by. The war was escalated very foolishly by the Biden administration. And one of the things we're seeing now is possibly the end game in Ukraine, where Ukraine very well may lose the war outright after hundreds of thousands of deaths. And all of this is going to look very bad for the Biden administration. At least that's how it's looking to me. And I'm wondering how Bronco and other people on this panel feel this may affect the election campaign. I'm just wondering if we see substantial setbacks in the battlefield, or even a disintegration of the Ukrainian army, which is a possibility over the next 10 months. This could be a huge black eye for Biden, since this has been touted as his major foreign policy accomplishment up till now. That combined with the Gaza war, the disastrous Gaza war, combined with the setbacks with the economy and all the other problems he's facing, that could pose a very serious challenge to his re-election. I'm wondering what other people think about that possibility.
Well, let me start with you, Bronco, and then I want John to pick this up as he talks about because it's hard to believe we're inside of 5 weeks before New Hampshire, and all of this is relevant because these are the things that people are talking about in New Hampshire. People don't have to declare a party, everybody. They just jump in and they tell you who they like. So, Bronco, why don't you answer? Just speculate, even with respect to the question that Dr. Gibbs just posed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very plausible scenario. I think if that happened, it would be, very bad for his campaign. I mean, just think about how the kind of negative portrayal, the bad scenes coming out of the Afghanistan withdrawal, dealt this kind of permanent black eye to Biden's presidency. That was probably the one single event that he got the most terrible publicity on. It was overwhelmingly negative media coverage. And I think if Russia does indeed decide to try and use this opportunity to roll over the Ukrainian forces, scenes of Russia seizing more territory and Ukrainian forces kind of fleeing, I think would be very, very bad for Biden because he staked so much of his presidency on this. I mean, remember the first ad I believe that he put out for his presidential campaign heavily about his support for the Ukrainian war effort. Secondly, I mean, I think even without all that, and by the way, I would add this is exactly why people like myself were, but for a long time, saying that diplomacy should be being pursued by the Biden administration, that they should be trying to get Russia at the negotiating table when there was actually inclination from Moscow that they did want to negotiate earlier this year and last year. Part of the reason was because it was entirely predictable that the GOP at one point would say, you know what, this war is too expensive. We don't want to keep funding this. And this is exactly what's happened. I mean, this is, anyone with even a passing knowledge of U.S. politics could have guessed that what we're seeing now would have happened. But, put aside all that, I mean, I would also say that the funding for the Ukraine war, I think, has already had an effect on Biden's re-election chances. Remember, he came to office with this promise of a foreign policy for the middle class. And what that broadly meant was the U.S. was not going to any longer, spend oodles of money on foreign wars, get itself entangled in all these conflicts overseas. Instead, the Biden administration would pursue a foreign policy that was had the interests of basically American workers at its heart. And that has not happened ever since, I would say, basically the start of this war and going up until today with Biden's support for what's happening in Gaza, which is, untold amounts of money have been going overseas. At the same time, the U.S. is unable to find money for things like COVID relief and not able to pass large parts of Biden's agenda, supposedly because it's too expensive. Money constantly seems to be able to be found to send, for the purpose of waging foreign wars. And I warned a year ago that, this is exactly the thing that led to Trump being reelected. Trump was constantly saying that money was being sent overseas instead of being spent on the welfare of Americans. And you've seen people saying that outright. There was some polling, I believe, by NBC not too long ago. They talked about young and African-American voters. And they quoted someone saying basically, like, look at all the money that's being found that's going to all these other countries. Why is that not money being spent on us? You had the mayor of East Palestine, if people remember that, where the terrible train derailment happened and there was a horrible, basically environmental disaster. The mayor of that town, complained that Biden actually never came to East Palestine, but he did, as this disaster was going on, he did go to Kiev. And so I think these criticisms that Biden has basically abandoned this foreign policy for the middle class and appears to be more interested in the welfare of people abroad than Americans. I mean, you can argue whether or not that's fair, but I think that is a perception that exists among a fairly broad swath of voters, and that's going to be a challenge, I think, for him to try and overcome.
John Nichols, pick it up from there. I mean, because now we're at the primary season where American voters are at last, after 4 years, well, 2 years, really 4 years for the presidential piece, are about to speak. And you're saying that his decision, Biden's decision to skip New Hampshire, and I certainly want others on the panel to weigh in on this because I thought that this was so compelling. You're calling this political malpractice. What do you mean? Political malpractice? That's really strong, John.
Well, I'm not alone on the political malpractice. One of the president's top supporters, Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, who really is, by many measures, a rising star in the Democratic Party, said that same phrase. In fact, he and I have talked about it quite a bit. Khanna has actually gone to New Hampshire as a Biden supporter and campaigned on his behalf because he is so concerned that Joe Biden is skipping New Hampshire. Now, people need to understand why Biden's skipping New Hampshire. He has run for president before and lost. This is, he's been running for president in many senses since the mid-1980s. And New Hampshire has never been a good state for him. And so as president, he has immense power, and he worked with the DNC primary process to begin in South Carolina. And they made a good argument for that. They said, look, South Carolina is more diverse than New Hampshire, and it is. But the problem with going to South Carolina is that South Carolina is not a swing state. South Carolina will vote Republican in November. And so if they really wanted to go to a more diverse state, they would have gone to Michigan or to Nevada or to Georgia. But they went to South Carolina because, frankly, President Biden thought he'd have a very safe route there. The mistake they made was to assume that New Hampshire would accept this. And New Hampshire did not. New Hampshire officials scheduled a January 23 primary, parallel to the Republican primary, and Joe Biden has officially skipped it. His name will not be on the ballot, but the names of Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson and other candidates will be. Those other candidates are campaigning there. At the same time, Republicans are campaigning there. They're all over New Hampshire, and they're grabbing the headlines. So what I wrote about is the concern on the part of New Hampshire Democrats. Remember, New Hampshire's in a swing state. It matters in November. On the part of New Hampshire Democrats, that Biden's not there and that the image is terrible.
But why? Why isn't he there? Who made that decision?
Well, it's got to come from Biden because, remember, a president controls the national committee of his party or her party. In this case, Biden has control over the DNC. Biden wanted the DNC to change the schedule so that New Hampshire would not go first. But he and his political advisors and people on the DNC miscalculated because New Hampshire, whether they like it or not, is going to hold a primary on January 23rd. Biden's not going to be there. And in New Hampshire, Biden supporters are working very, very hard to do a write-in campaign. But you know how hard a write-in campaign is in any state. And so you end up in a situation where Biden has a self-inflicted wound. He has chosen not to start the process in the same place where the Republicans are starting the process. So on January 23rd, the headline is going to be some Republican wins New Hampshire. And it could be, not saying it will be, but it could be that Biden is embarrassed in New Hampshire, that 30, 40% of people vote for other candidates up there. And that's not something that had to happen, right? He could have done that. And the reason I wrote the article was not to talk about New Hampshire. I mean, New Hampshire is a frame for it. The real reason I wrote about it is the argument that Joe Biden is not really putting together a very smart campaign. He's not starting early. He's not taking advantage of the primary process. He is not physically present in the places where he needs to be present on a very regular basis. I mean, maybe he'll go to South Carolina, but South Carolina is not going to be a swing state in November. And so at the end of the day, what I'm arguing is that Joe Biden, by skipping New Hampshire, sends a very powerful and I think pretty painful signal about the kind of fluidity, the calculus of this campaign. And it's something people ought to be concerned about. And again, I'm not alone in saying this. The people I interviewed for this piece, national folks and folks in New Hampshire, very savvy people who cover and follow presidential politics closely, are very strong in saying this is a mistake, and it's a bad mistake.
Well, I mean, it's a huge mistake, but I'm just trying to find out what is he thinking? What is he thinking? I mean, words fail me because I've seen him run. We have seen him run up close and personal, run for president in the mid '80s. That did not work out well for him at all.
Didn't work well in 2008 either.
It did at all. And running as vice president, they had to try to mute him.
Yeah.
So I mean, when he gets onto the president, when he's in the Senate, he's great. But when he gets onto these presidential stages, it's like, oh no. And I'm just trying to figure out what the political calculation is, because you need every vote, John. You can't afford to alienate people.
And here's the deal. This is what I'd say. I've covered Joe Biden in many senses for many decades and seen him in a lot of settings. I don't agree with the Republican calculus or even the criticism by some very wise folks that he's a gaffe machine or that he makes all sorts of mistakes when he's out on the trail. He does. He makes the same mistakes that many candidates do. And when you say a million words a day, you're going to screw up a little bit. I think the problem for Biden is a lack of presence, right? Not physically being there where he needs to be. Mm-hmm. He is a president running for re-election. He is down in the polls. His approval ratings are poor. He should be either campaigning aggressively, right? Going out there, doing what's necessary to raise those approval ratings, to reach out to people, to make connections, to frame out a 2024 campaign that is distinct from his past campaigns. That is saying, look, I want another term because here is what I want to do. Here are the things I know domestically that have to be done. And he should be talking about that a lot so that people are hearing him, seeing him. And he's not. He is most days hunkered down in the White House or off, at Camp David or whatever. And I'm sure he's working very hard. I have no doubt of that. But remember, a president is not just a manager. A president's job is not just to, come in the morning and look at all the reports and, talk to all the people and make sure, the I's dotted and that T is crossed. A president's job is also to be a leader. And in an election year, the president's job is to be the leader of his or her party. And my suggestion here is that by skipping a key primary and by not really showing himself during the primary process, and certainly at the level that he should, Joe Biden is ceding the first half of the year to the Republicans. Oh. He is essentially saying the dynamism is on your side. You get to make the noise. You get to be seen. Now, admittedly, many of these Republicans are messes, right? The more they are seen, the more many folks will say, boy, I don't want that. But at the end of the day, they are a force. They're the ones who are seen. Biden on the sidelines. This cannot be the direction this goes. If it is, then the conversation you were just having becomes very, very relevant. Because then, as somebody who's not defining out a forward vision, who doesn't have real control over this process, Biden becomes very, very vulnerable to the disastrous development. And remember, in 1968, you talk about, suggesting that Biden might do a Johnson move, where on, March 31st, he goes on television on a Sunday night and announces he's not running for re-election. That's what Johnson did in 68. Well, remember what happened in 68 before that. Johnson was confronted by the Tet Offensive, which showed that a war he had committed to in a very major way was in fact going wrong. It was going bad, parallel that to Ukraine. And then he went into New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, he actually won, but he didn't win big enough. And he didn't campaign in New Hampshire in the way that he should have. And so he was seen as having a setback there. And that then destabilized him politically. When you know that history, right, then you get to Johnson quitting the race. And here's the really scary thing for people who maybe don't want Donald Trump to be president. Johnson quit the race handed it off to his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, who went on to lose. And I can guarantee you, as somebody, as a historian of politics, if Johnson had stayed in the race, he probably would have won, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was so dispirited, so, beaten down, and so unwilling to change direction, right, as regards Vietnam, that he exited the race. It was a disaster for the Democratic Party. In many ways, I would argue a disaster for the country. And so Biden, in my view, is setting himself up for this sort of situation. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe it won't. Maybe Ukraine will turn out well. Maybe New Hampshire will turn out well. Maybe Biden coasts through and everything goes the way that the Biden people apparently within the White House imagine. But what if I'm right? What if there's even a 10% chance that Ukraine goes bad, that New Hampshire produces an embarrassing result, that ensuing primaries are problematic, and Biden finds himself in an even more vulnerable point than he is in at this point?
I mean, and in politics, you don't take those kind of gambles. I mean, particularly at times like these. Stay right there. I want to bring on Andre to give a comment before you give a closing thought. Andre, you've been holding for a minute. Please, thank you for indulging us. We want to hear from you, though. Got about 90 seconds for your comment or question. Thank you, sweetie.
Yeah, good morning, Santita. Thank you. No, I was just listening, but I just wanted to weigh in on some of these young voters. What I do know about the young voters is a lot of them don't understand civics and how the branches of government function. And in order for them to be upset about what they are not getting, they first need to understand why they are not getting it and how to go about getting it. First, the president, executive orders can only go so far. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it takes a majority. In some cases, it takes 60 votes to get things passed, legislation passed. And you need to control the House and the Senate for certain things. So Joe Biden may want to do certain things, but he doesn't have the votes. Thirdly, voting rights have been under attack. Once these young people understand the obstacles in their way and what's stopping them from getting what they want, they should become more involved. They should vote, and they should work to elect a House and a Senate that gives the votes to the president to accomplish more of these needs, the needs that they have. If the media was fair, they would tell these young people this and not lead them astray after all of the media is supposed to inform and not share these biased polls that are designed to set it.
Andre, let's not make the presumption that these young people are not politically savvy. They really have a real understanding of the system.
Not suggesting that they are.
No. I'm just saying they understand the importance of the elections at the federal, state, local, county levels. They are unwilling to compromise in many ways that we have been willing to, because because these kids, they've grown up with a black president, they've grown up with women being on the ticket. They're over all of that. The firsts, the onlys, they're done. Now they want some deliverables. Stay right there, John. You've got the last 2 minutes. You heard, because Andre's making a compelling argument for what a lot of people say, but these young people are not hearing that.
Yeah, well, Andre's exactly right. No, there's no question. He's exactly right. Things are complicated, right? Things are much more complex than much of our media communicates, than much of our political class communicates. That doesn't matter. If you take the hand that you're dealt from the deck, and the hand that we've been dealt from the deck is, or not we, but that Biden's been dealt from the deck, is one where his approval ratings are at record lows, largely because of a deep slippage of support among young people, but also other constituencies within his coalition. He is in many polls, not all, but in many polls, trailing Donald Trump in battleground states. And in fact, if Nikki Haley were somehow to beat Trump, which I don't think will happen, she's even more ahead. And so Joe Biden, like it or not, is in a vulnerable place. He's president of the United States. He has a lot of power. But as, again, I argue in the big article on New Hampshire that we've got as the nation, he isn't doing the things that a president in a difficult circumstance would logically do. Mm-hmm. Because, again, as I said before, maybe everything turns out all right. But what if it doesn't?
if there is a vulnerability, why not address it? Why skip the first major primary? Why have a kind of dot down primary strategy? Why not be out there in the same states where the Republicans are, standing strong, delivering a message for the 21st century, talking about winning not just the presidency, but getting a Congress you can work with? It's exactly what I'm talking about. But the president himself has to use his bully pulpit. And as I argue in the article, I don't think he is. I think he is ceding territory to the Republicans, not willingly, not intentionally, but it is the case. He is ceding territory to the Republicans at a time when people are starting to focus on presidential politics. That is a very, very dangerous thing to do politically.
And you wonder who is giving him this kind of advice, and why is he following it?
He is a senior politician, someone who's been in politics for more than 50 years.
Yeah.
He has to, because some of this has to fall on him, right?
Oh, no. I'm not saying it shouldn't fall on him.
He should advise. Oh, I know you.
Oh, yeah.
But if he's bad advice, he should with advisors. He should say to his advisors, "This is bad advice."
But he should be talking to people who've run for president before, and he should be talking to some of the folks who beat him. So he can get, some, just stay right there. I gotta get off. I gotta get off. I got a heart out. Love you, everybody. Alex, thank you for a great show. Gonna get some closing thoughts from everybody right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Love you, everybody. Have a great one. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm running today because I've got movers in here. I am literally moving to another place. But you were saying, John.
Well, I'll say very quickly because I have to run, and I'm sure other people do as well. Look, if you're looking for advice, Barack Obama is a pretty good person to turn to. He's won some elections and, in fact, beaten Biden in the past. But what I would advise is that he should start listening to the people who are on the ground and who are saying, look, this needs to be done better. This needs to be done more energetically. And you look at people like Ro Khanna. Mm-hmm. Ro Khanna is a national spokesman for Biden, but he has broken with Biden on this and has personally gone into New Hampshire repeatedly and said, A, it's a bad move that the president isn't coming to New Hampshire, and B, I'm going to try my hardest to save him here, to make this work. But if you were to listen to people like Ro Khanna, Arnie Arneson, who I read about in my article, Kathy Sullivan, who's former state party chair up there, and other folks, if you listen to them, I think what they would say is, come to New Hampshire, fly in, appear, campaign, say, okay, it was a mistake to not make New Hampshire the first primary. You're going anyway. I'm going to go up there. I'll go to South Carolina as well and respect them greatly. I'll go to Nevada as well. But the bottom line is, get on that plane. I thought the metaphor that was used a few minutes ago was incredibly powerful. Biden went to Ukraine, but he didn't go to East Palestine, right?
Which was crazy.
Bottom line,
that was crazy.
This president needs to get out of Washington and get out to where voters are deciding elections. It will begin in a matter of weeks.
It has already started, John.
Of course. It is a real process.
It's like this no longer COVID. Come out the basement. Hello?
Well, that's bottom line. And so, look, this has been a great conversation, and I heard a lot of what was said before I came on, and it was brilliant. And I would just suggest this is a conversation that needs to continue. This is a conversation that cannot end here, this day, or this minute. This is not just punditry and, let's talk about this today and then we'll go on to something else. This is a critical conversation about, frankly, the future of the country. And if you indeed are concerned about the loss of the 2024 election by Democrats for the president, other posts, this is the time to talk about it. Don't talk about it in November after something goes wrong. Talk about it a year out and figure out how to get it right.
And push Biden and push him. You don't help people. Yeah. It's just like our stance with Israel. If you care about Israel, you engage in loving critique, and sometimes you have to shake them and say, don't do this. You're out of order here. You're going to hurt yourself. You say that to Biden. Hey, man, don't do no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Or you better get on over here because this is a problem. That's what friends are for. I mean, come on,
right.
John.
Let me leave you with this one thought, a very quick one. And then I really do have to go, and I know you.
Me too, because I've got my
well.
movers in here, and I've got to speak with them, and the people from my new place are calling me, so I got to run.
One simple thought: foreign policy blunders have ruined Democratic re-election campaigns in the past. Harry Truman re-election in 1952. Korean War was not popular. He went in New Hampshire and he lost to Faber, and shortly thereafter folded his campaign. 1968, Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson faced the Tet Offensive in the start of 1968, and then a weak showing in New Hampshire to Eugene McCarthy. He left that campaign. In each of those cases, Truman stood down, Johnson stood down, and in November of that year, the Republicans won the presidency. So when you've got a foreign policy crisis challenge, if you don't address it properly,
sent you a text.
Spoiling your own re-election campaign, but B, you will open up the possibility, the very real possibility, that your party loses the presidency. So Biden really should think about that. He should pause and recognize the circumstance that he is in, and understand that if he doesn't address Gaza, and if he doesn't figure out how to address Ukraine, I think with diplomacy, if he doesn't figure out a way out of these things, he faces a real chance that he could be the third president in that succession,
Well,
Truman, Johnson, Biden.
He is on his way, and that is what is frustrating, because he's what he's doing is he's not making good sense. He's not. And when you say that, people, you got the trolls coming in on you saying, oh my goodness, you're not being sufficiently pro-Biden. Are you joking me? Before I leave my mother, she's going to tell me or call me before I go to bed or first thing the next morning after she's seen me. You know what? I didn't like that lipstick. You know, when you said such and such, you need to say it this way, because this leaves too much room for error. When people care about you, they criticize you and they help you. And you need to understand that as a candidate, you've never been strong. So I need to talk to some people who've been strong, and there are plenty of people who have been stronger than I. So you know what? Let me talk to you. How did you do it? If Jesse Jackson can run in New Hampshire in 1984, he can run in 2024. Get out of here. Get out of here. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But I got to run. I got these people in here, and I got to get out of here because I'm moving. But Leslie, I want to give you a closing thought.
First of all, I also want to thank Mr. Nichols for his November 11th article. They helped to get Biden elected. Now they're demanding that he back a ceasefire. And, I would say that there's a lot of real concerns about what's going to happen in November. It's possible that a lot of these young people and African Americans and Arab and Muslim Americans will come back because they are terrified at the thought of another Trump administration, but it's clearly possible that they won't. And, as we talked about a little bit during the break, I'm not sure if we've got a Democratic candidate who can prevent a repeat of the Humphrey scenario. And I think that's something we should all be very concerned about.
We should be. But if he won't listen, if he's getting upset with his staff, like you're thinking.
And also a lot of the advice from congressional staff, presidential staff, executive department staff saying how strong the opposition to the Gaza war is.
Look, they're walking out of the White House.
Was saying he needs to be listening.
Leslie, they're walking out. These are the most establishment people in Washington. Congressional staffers don't stage walkouts. White House interns and White House staffers don't stage walkouts. They don't do that. The mess hall in the White House looks like is a 5-star restaurant, y'all. Okay? That is what is happening. And if you're not going to pay attention to that, if you think that some lobby is going to come and squeeze these people have had it. It's another day. And this is when you hear my frustration bubble over. I am like, what are you doing? We cannot afford for child poverty to be any worse than it is. We cannot afford more homeless people. I cannot afford to continue to give Israel $4 million off the top. Not when my public schools are in such a mess. Not when I don't even have 1 million hospital beds for 330 million plus Americans. Are you for real right now?
Exactly.
No. So look, I love you all. Is Daryl, are you still there?
I am. Santita, have a safe move.
I need you. I know you're going to be on at 12 o'clock today, 11 o'clock Central Standard Time on WOL. I need you to make a quick statement, sweetie, because I got to get my stuff moved. Oh, my movers are here.
Well, Cynthia, I'll keep it real quick. Don't underestimate our young voters. It's the young voters that brought the Confederate statutes down, that brought about the student debt relief, that brought about environmental change, as well as gun control. And ask Senators Warnock and Senator Ossoff about young voters. Young voters are going to come out and vote. The question remains, will they not vote for a presidential candidate that doesn't meet their needs? I think the young voters are going to come out. They're active, they're ready, and they're going to hit the trail. And the only question is, will President Biden stand up now and try to do something to persuade and keep those young voters with them? I think that's a real question that we're at now, Santita and New Hampshire. The error that he's made there is just, whether it shows that he doesn't care, or that he's too old, or that he makes bad decisions. None of those are good alternatives, and they need to get that corrected. I look forward to some more discussion on it, Santita.
Absolutely. I think he's just trying to win, but sometimes you win by you lose and you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this one on the chin. The next time I am going to win. And that's what you do. But what he's doing right now, this strategy is poor. It's poor, particularly when you are struggling you're struggling. You're already not winning. Go for broke, man. Come on. I'm telling you. I love you all. I love you, Leslie. I love you all, but I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got these movies here. I love them, and I got people are calling me, and I got to get out of here. I love you.
All right. I'm going to sign off too. Thank you so much, Santita.
Oh, you got to come back. Sending you all much love.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Happy.
I
Bye-bye.
love you all. I'm running because I've got to move. Yes. I love you all. I got to go. Okay. Thank you, AW. Thank you, everybody. Love you. I will see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless. Bye-bye.